Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. I'm Anna Garifine. I'm the chair of the Managers Committee, and I am joined with Dawn Morrow, the co-chair of the Managers Committee. We are excited to bring to you common complaints that you are seeing in the real estate industry, how to avoid them, and what to do if you have a situation that you're stuck in. So I wanted to start out by allowing Chris Lopez from MORR to introduce himself.
Hello, thank you very much, and I appreciate it. So my name is Christopher Lopez. I'm the Professional Standards Administrator at Monmouth Ocean Regional Realtors. And I essentially am kind of at the forefront of any ethical complaints or arbitration requests.
Hi, Chris, it's Dawn. I just wanted to ask you a few questions about what are the most common complaints that MORR gets when you pick up that phone?
So when it comes to professional standards, the most common complaints when it comes to ethical complaints, I would think it's usually, well, they usually stem from the like a lack of misunderstanding or a lack of communication, a lack of awareness. So it's usually behavioral issues, or realtors not kind of understanding the their ethical duties and how they should be following the code of ethics. So it usually stems from that. There could be maybe sometimes there's a lack of professionalism mixed into that, but anything from kind of what I see is usually some type of behavioral issues that gets brought to me. So it's usually the complainant is quite dissatisfied with how they exchanged communication and just kind of how a lot of their meetings went. That's usually what it is when it comes to ethical complaints. When it comes to arbitration, again, it's usually miscommunication, misunderstanding, the lack of awareness. But of course, there's some type of monetary gain involved. So I've seen, procuring cause, confusion with commissions. And again, it really comes from that miscommunication between brokers, between agents, and it just kind of spirals from there.
So you're saying that ethics basically would have to do more with behavioral issues, and arbitration comes down to commission issues.
Yeah, there has to be some type of money involved, and usually when that's the case, it's when you go to file, it would be between brokerages, but I've seen it's usually agents who come calling because there is an issue with some type of, there's that money issue. So I usually have to explain to them that, yes, it's good that you called me, but you definitely need to get your broker involved because ultimately they will be the ones who can file for arbitration.
Okay. And is it always realtors? Do you ever get calls from the public, or is it both?
So yeah, when it comes to ethical complaints, that anyone is allowed to file a formal complaint with the board when it comes to ethics. That could be members of the public, that could be agents, members, people who aren't even associated with our board. Anyone could file an ethics complaint. When it comes to arbitration, that can only be between brokers, and it's usually a Monmouth Ocean Regional Realtor member who is coming and complaining. There is situations where it can be an inter-board arbitration, but most commonly it's between brokers who are who are a part of our board.
Okay, so just to follow up on that, you're saying if it's about arbitration, that your broker definitely needs to be involved, and yes, that the complaint should come from your broker.
Yes, that's exactly what happens. I can send off the information to an agent, but I would usually ask for their broker's email and have them CC'd, because ultimately when they go to file, it needs to be coming from the broker, not the agent.
And what happens once you get the call? How do they file a formal complaint?
So usually when I get the call, it's usually just it's quite a lengthy process. So I usually start off by kind of explaining the entire process, what they should expect, right? But ultimately, after that call, it's either you could do it by mail or email. I would send off either an ethics pamphlet or an arbitration pamphlet. In the ethics case, that will include the code of ethics and then a E1 form. And that E1 form is essentially you that's the formal complaint form where you would cite which articles that the other realtor has violated. And attached to that would be their narrative and any evidence that they have. And they would fill that out, send that back to me. And from there, that goes to grievance to review. And then for arbitration, essentially, it's the same type of ordeal. We'd have that conversation. And after that, I would send out an arbitration pamphlet, which includes the agreement and request to mediate, because that is an option when it comes to arbitration. And then as well, an A1 form, which is a request to arbitrate.
And what if the agent isn't familiar with what ethics complaint it may be, what violation it may be? Do you help them with that, or are they on their own for that?
When it comes to me, I can't help to explain the articles because I can't really get involved. I can't help them cite an article because I would become involved within this complaint, which ultimately could get me involved with a hearing if it's to go to, a formal hearing, with a tribunal. So when it comes to that, I can't. But if it's a member of the public, let's say, and this gets to grievance, essentially what can happen is if grievance thinks that there's a lack of understanding of the code of ethics, they can actually assign a member of grievance to help the complainant reform their complaint to work with, the code of ethics and exactly which article they should be citing, and then that gets sent back to grievance to review.
And does anybody ever file a complaint, both ethics and arbitration, or is it just one or the other?
Yeah. So you can file, they can be linked, obviously. So there can be an arbitration, and as a result of that, something ethical can happen. So we have seen arbitration and ethics complaints linked, but when that does happen, arbitration always comes first. So you go through, that gets sent to grievance. There would be a hearing with the Professional Standard Committee, and then ultimately affirmed by the Board of Directors. And once that whole thing is done, we would go all the way back to the beginning with the ethical complaint, and then the process starts again.
Okay. And when does a realtor or the public know if they should be contacting the board or if they should be contacting the real estate commission?
So in that case, it's usually if anything's kind of connected with, let's say, your license or kind of anything in that area, you want to contact the real estate commission. If it's something extremely egregious, you might want to contact the real estate commission. But ultimately, if you want to contact the board, it's always recommended to contact your brokers and have a conversation before contacting the board. Because again, as I said, there's often miscommunication between agents or brokers. And if you can kind of snip that and quickly, cut that off and actually start to communicate and gain an understanding of the situation, we've often seen issues resolved that way through communication. But ultimately, issues with the board, you can bring many issues to the board actually, but it ranges from minimal to certain egregious complaints, but ultimately we can accept quite a bit. It's ultimately up to grievance to review and see if that's something that the board should be handling.
Okay. And you were talking about alternatives. So if you could time also to introduce Tricia Beam, if you'd like, and what some of the alternatives are. Yeah,
so actually Tricia Beam is the top ombudsman for us. So when it comes to ethical and complaints and arbitration complaints, you have a couple options before filing formally. There is an ombudsman program that we have where before getting into the formal process, we can get an ombudsman involved. And I usually have a call with Tricia, and she will reach out, or whoever the ombudsman is in this case will reach out. They'll reach out to the complainant, get their narrative, and then they'll also reach out to the respondent in this case, get their narrative, and try to come to some type of solution before this gets to a formal ethical complaint. If it doesn't work out, it would go over into a hearing, but I can let Tricia explain that a bit more if she'd like.
Thanks, Chris. So the ombudsman role is something that started with MORR back in 2015 and 2016. And it's basically an informal process that we offer when a complaint comes in, whether it's ethics or arbitration. A lot of times it's with the public and versus a realtor. Sometimes it's just people that just want to vent. Other times it's realtor to realtor, and can involve real ethical issues. Most of the time, the public does not understand that we have requests that they want money back from a realtor, or they want the realtor to pay for expenses like inspections when they don't get a house, or they don't feel that their offer was presented properly. And you can imagine in this market, it's frequent. A lot of times there are serious issues involved that Chris did allude to. Sometimes there's some very strong ethical problems. Most of the time, those do not get resolved during ombudsman training, or when there's an ombudsman involved, rather. It can be a technical issue. It just can be an issue about procedure. And like I said, a lot of times it just involves somebody wanting to vent. And that's more the case when it's realtor to realtor. The members of the public, they're really upset. So when I have an ombudsman call come in and it's a member of the public, I always try to diffuse the situation. I always try to get their take on it. I kind of can explain to how it works when there is a complaint against a realtor, because it's not always, we can't get your money back. We can't force someone to give you their commission. It's sometimes very just procedural questions, and they don't understand that we have no authority on things like that. With the public, I'm always extra careful about what I say and what I don't say, because you have to really avoid making any kind of judgment. And I would tell you, sometimes I don't even get to the respondent to get an answer, because it's just, there's like no sense to the conversation with the member of the public. They're not understanding at all. And there's really no time to, I guess there's just no opportunity to even get a response, because it's not going to mean anything. It's not going to be valid. We do try to encourage them to talk to the person if they haven't already, even if it's, they didn't represent them. Some brokerages do take a position that they don't want to talk to the other party's buyer or seller. But we try to do that only to avoid having a formal complaint logged. Because once it gets to the formal complaint stage, if it goes through grievance, everything changes. So we do try to get it to be resolved. And I would tell you, probably about 80% of the time we're successful. Sometimes they don't even respond to you after they've given you the complaint. You've talked to the other party. They don't even, you leave them a message, or you try 2 or 3 times and text them, and they don't even call you back or text you back. So we don't log, we just log what comes in, but we don't ever really, log the whole, what the case is involved or anything like that. And of course, being an ombudsman, I could not, if it came down to through grievance, didn't want mediation, came to professional standards, because I chair professional standards, I cannot be involved in anything that would involve that ombudsman issue.
Okay, great. Thank you. I want to just remind everybody, if they have any questions, they can put their questions in the Q&A. We are monitoring that, and we will be asking those questions to our panelists. So Anna, if you want to go to our next segment.
Yes, thank you guys. That was great information. We appreciate it. I don't have any questions in the Q&A for this topic, but we will have a Q&A section at the end that if you guys have any questions, you can pop those in and we'll get to all of that. We're going to be bringing all our panelists back at the end.